And we'll go to sharing the screen. And welcome those who are joining us in watching this recording. Thank you. And Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Kitshanu B'mitzvotav V'tzivanu La'asok B'divrei Torah.
Amen.
So the verse, we looked at it yesterday, but we're going to look at it again. V'haita Shabbat ha'aretz lachem lo'ochla. And the Sabbath of the land, that is to say that the Sabbath, the resting, that the land is going to take place, because there's no plowing and harvesting and agricultural work, shall be to you as for eating. You can still consume what the land produces on its own. And I'm assuming the fruit trees are going to continue to produce, et cetera, et cetera. And hopefully, yeah, there might be some grain, et cetera. I'm not sufficiently adept at agriculture to know how much would grow of itself. L'cha, so the reason it's saying this to you, of course, is because it's been telling you to leave the land alone, and essentially how the land is becoming ownerless. And so it clarifies, this verse clarifies that you, of course, still can eat what the land produces. L'cha, so who's able to eat this? For you, ula avdecha, and for your servant, your slave, ula amatecha, and your maidservant, v'lischircha, that would be the one you've hired, someone you've hired, ula toshavcha, and that would refer to someone who has settled, and Rashii will explain that refers to someone who is not an Israelite, hagarim imach, who live amongst you. So people who are non-Israelites, they all have the right to help themselves to what the land produces in this year. So no sense of ownership. So here we go. So the Sabbath of the land, etc. Afalpi she isartim alecha, even though, or asartim alecha, okay, even though I have forbidden it to you, lo ba'achila, v'lo ba'hana'a asartim. I have not forbidden you regarding eating, or hana'a means benefiting in some other way. So you could benefit, if you made something of it, or that kind of benefit that was not necessarily food consumption. You still could use the produce for such purposes. Ela shelo tinhog bahem kabal habayit. The point is that I don't want you to act regarding them as the owner. Ella, literally it means householder. But Ella, however, hakol yiyu shavim ba, everyone will have equal right to it. Ata, you, uschircha, and your hireling, vetoshavcha, and your settler. Very interesting. I mean, a very radical notion regarding our relationship to the land that we own and don't really own, at least in the land of Israel. And the idea of this is a very beautiful way in which to try and equalize the various social strata. Shabbat ha'aretz lachem lo'olchla, right? It is the Sabbath of the land shall be to you for food. So this is how he understands it. Min hashvut ata ochel. You are allowed to eat from produce that is treated according to the laws of the sabbatical year. Ve'i'atachel min hashamor. But if you've stored up any food, say from the 6th year, and you've stored it away, that's not what you're entitled to eat. You cannot eat that. It has to be all available.
How do you know it's from the 6th year? What if I thought the idea was,
or the 7th year for sure.
if you gather it and store it up,
Yeah,
on
it
the
could be
seventh
referred,
year, you're
it
doing
could, it
the
could
wrong
be,
thing.
yeah, that's true. No, it would
If you
be.
gathered it on the sixth year, you're not doing the wrong thing,
No,
right?
that's true. I'm talking about during the seventh year. So what I'm wondering is if any food that you have on the seventh, during the seventh year, basically well, certainly it's not marketable. And again, if it's for I guess if it's for your immediate consumption, and it's from the sixth year, and thank you, Shira Beth, for catching me on this, then that might be something else. But I can't imagine, storing large amounts and not allowing others. But it could be that it's just the seventh year. And we're talking about if you didn't do the right thing. And in fact, what you're suggesting makes more sense.
I
That is to
think
say
a
that
lot
if
of things,
yes,
a lot of things are labeled "ein chashash letevel o shvi'it."
yeah, okay,
Things
okay,
are
so
labeled that way in Israel, meaning
right,
don't worry, this package does not contain anything that was grown on the seventh year.
right. And
But if it was grown on the sixth year and you happen to still have it, fine, doesn't matter. That
I
was
think
my
that makes sense. No, I think that makes sense. It does. It makes more sense. I was applying it far more universally, but it's quite possible, or in all likelihood, that that's not what we're talking about. That you are absolutely right, and that it's talking about if you went and collected the food by and gathered up food and put it away so that people couldn't, so that the maidservant or the stranger or the settler would not have access to it. You don't have access to it either, and that it's referring to seventh year produce. That makes sense. I think you're absolutely right. So thank you. Lecha, for you, Ula avdecha amatecha, for you, your servant and your maidservant. And this is, of course, from the Sifra. The Fishinemar, the reason why is it's stated back in Exodus 23, that's in Parshat Mishpatim, it says, the achlu evyonei amcha, the poor of your people shall eat it. In other words, this is the first time, remember, when the idea of Shemitah is mentioned in the Torah. Yachol. So since it says regarding the poor, Yachol yu asurim ba'achila, it's possible that the ones who will be forbidden to eat it, la'ashirim, to the wealthy. In other words, because the Torah specifies the poor, well, then maybe any seventh year produce is forbidden to wealthy people. Talmud Lomar, for that reason, scripture states, lacha, for you, ula avdachal amatecha, and for your servant and your maidservant. Hare ba'alim v'avadim, okay? Behold, indeed, owners, right, and servants, ushfachot and maidservants, amorin kan, are all included here. It's truly democratic. Uleschircha, to your hireling, that's how I would translate it, ula toshavcha, and to your settler. And again, according to the Torah Kohanim, af hanochrim, referring to non-Jews. That would be a nochri. Literally, it means a stranger, but it refers to a non-Jew. V'liv hem techa v'lachaya asher ba'artzecha. So there's really, as we dig down into or drill into the verses themselves and try to look so carefully, basically meditate on these verses, we come up with sort of very interesting ideas, as you'll see in a moment. So for your cattle and for the wild animals which are in your land, tiyeh, it shall be kol tfuata, all its produce le'echol, to consume. So we're now going to animals, right? Even on the animal level. So this is the Rashii. Ulevehem techa v'lachaya. Im chaya ochelet. If the Torah is saying that the wild animal is allowed to help themselves, behema lo kol shekain, wouldn't we automatically figure that cattle also can feed on this food? Why do we have both categories? Shemizonoteha alecha, because because we know, okay, that you are responsible to feed your cattle, your domesticated animals. So if you're responsible for that, okay, and we're saying that the wild beasts are allowed to eat it, well, for sure, the cattle are going to be able to eat this, because you're not responsible for feeding the wild animals. So there's a sense in which cattle have even more entitlement to the food that you're producing. Ma Talmud Lomar, v'liv hemtecha. So what does Scripture teach us by adding this word, v'liv hemtecha, and for your cattle? Makish behema l'chaya. It connects cattle to wild beasts. Kozman shechaya ochelet minasadeh. As long as the wild animals can go into the field and there's food for them to eat in the field, you can feed your cattle from what you have stored in the house. But once the wild animals cannot find that particular food in the field, you can no longer feed your domesticated animals from what's stored in the house. And this is called the time of the bi'ur, meaning you have to remove the fodder, the cattle food outside the house, so that wild animals and cattle can eat it, so that it's accessible also to the wild animals. And that's the notion of the two being put together. Yes. Question? All right. Going on. V'safarta lacha sheva shabtot. I'm sorry, I'm hearing a comment. Is this, okay, I'll just keep going. And you shall count for yourselves 7 Sabbaths of years. Sheva shanim, sheva pamim, 7 years, 7 times. V'hayu lecha yemei sheva shabbatot hashanim, and so that the time of these 7 Sabbaths of years, Tesha v'arba'im shana, they'll add up to 49 years.
Yeah. Rabbi, I can't understand. If you, on the 7th year, if you rest the land, let the land rest, what happens at the 8th and 9th year? Because some of those fruit trees are not going to bloom. They may take 3 or 4 years to bloom yet.
Why? They don't bloom every year? I mean, my experience is that fruit trees seem to bloom every year.
No, the fruit trees bloom every year? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I thought it took a while.
I believe they do. I believe they do. It may take it.
Yes. Hello. Yes, fruit trees bloom every year. And when you don't prune them on the 7th year, sometimes they just put out like an amazing amount of new growth and fruit.
Okay. So the thing is that you're allowed to sow in the 8th year, you'll be able to start the cycle again. Okay. You'll see this year goes from Rosh Hashanah, from Tishrei through to the end of the year. That's the way these years are counted. At any rate, let's take a look at, Harlan, did I answer your question?
Yes, yeah, it's fine.
All right. What's more, okay, what we're going to see, there is an issue you'll see coming up. Shabbatot shanim, okay? So when we're talking about the Sabbaths of years, Shmitot shanim, we're talking about the sabbatical years. In other words, you're going to count out 7 sabbatical years. Now, Yachol Ya'aseh Sheva Shanim Ritzufot Shmita. Well, what if you make 7 consecutive years, Shemitah years? Okay. Since it just said 7 sabbatical years. So make 7 years, 7 sabbatical years. V'ya'aseh Yovel acharehem. And then you can make the Jubilee after those 7 years. Talmud Loma, Sheva Shanim, Sheva Panim. That's why it says 7 years, 7 times, so that you don't have this other possibility of understanding. It's to get rid of any ambiguity in the law. Heve Omer, okay, so I must say, Kol Shemitah u'Shemitah Bizmana, that each Shemitah year has to come at its appropriate time, meaning at the end of the at the end of every 6 years.
I don't understand the Jubilee. What I don't understand is what happens if you free people and they get their land back and so forth and so on. I don't understand why you have to wait 50 years to get your land back. That's a long time. In some of the Parsha here, if you've worked 7 years for somebody, you can be free. Why wait 50 years? I don't get it.
Okay, so they have to do with different circumstances. First of all, if you're buying, this is going to be discussed later on in the Torah portion, that the price of a land was based on of how many years you had till the Jubilee year when the land would have to return to its original owners. So I mean, we're really a little bit off topic here, but basically that's that. So the value of the land was based on the number of harvests you would be able to get. If you purchased land from someone else, and then you realize that at the end of, at the Jubilee year, you would have to return that land to its original owners. And
why do I have to wait till Jubilee? If I have a relative that's very wealthy, he can buy that land back, can he?
Yes, he can actually. He
well,
can.
why do okay. Then I don't have to be a slave to the owner of my land. Okay. I can have somebody buy it back for me.
You could.
Okay.
That is a possibility. It discusses those possibilities. The issue is fairness, Harlan, okay? And making sure that what you're buying, when you buy land from someone, is you're buying the use of the land. In a sense, you're actually renting it, but you're not buying it outright. And that's because they realized that people's security in terms of real estate, it has to do a lot with that. And that when people are landless, they're a lot more vulnerable. And there was an attempt here also to try in a fair way not to have such a huge disparity between the wealthy and the poor, to try to avoid that. And that's, so later on in Deuteronomy, here we don't read about it, but in Deuteronomy we talk about the cancellation of debts instead. So, but here the situation of the 50 years for a person would have to do with, that was their choice. Basically, they were set free in the 7th year, but if they chose not, this is discussed in Deuteronomy, okay? At any rate, here it's done in a different way, and we're talking here about, we'll see what Rashii has to say when we talk about, when we're talking about emancipation. Okay. Here, I'm looking to see. All right, I'll go back to here. V'hayu lecha yemei sheva, right? These 7 years shall be for you. Magid lecha, this is to tell you, she'af al pi shelo asita shmitot, that even if you didn't observe the sabbatical years, aseh yovel l'sof mentet, you should still do the Jubilee year. You should still sound the shofar. The word yovel refers to the ram's horn and the sounding of the shofar at the end of 49 years, even if you didn't observe the sabbatical years. Okay, that's why it's talking about the days of the 7 and doesn't say the days of Shemitah or something like that. So, Upshuto shel mikra, but Rashii says, but the simple meaning of this verse, Ya'aleh lecha cheshbon shnot hashmitot lemispar mimtet. It's simply telling you that the sum of all these years of that are these sabbatical cycles will actually total 49. That's the simple meaning. But the previous meaning about not having observed the Shemitah, etc. That is a drush on the verse, based on the words of the verse. Here we go. V'ha'avarta shofar tru'ah b'chodesh hashvi'i. And you shall cause, you'll see how Rashi's going to say it, but you shall cause a shofar of tru'ah, of blasting, b'chodesh hashvi'i, in the 7th month, ba'asor lachodesh, on the 10th day of the month, be'yom ha'kippurim, on Yom Kippur. Ta'aviru shofar. Okay, so this is the way the verse gets divided up is, you shall cause a shofar of tru'ah on the 7th month, on the 10th of the month. On Yom Kippur, ta'aviru shofar b'chol artzachem. You shall cause the shofar to pass through, literally that's what it means, to pass through your land. So when it says passing through, that is a strange way of expressing this, and Rashi is going to explain it. Va'avarta, right? You shall cause to pass. Lashon, this connotes, based on Exodus 36, Vaya'aviru kol b'machaneh. So it says they caused a sound, a voice in the camp, and he says Lashon hachrazah. What this really denotes is a proclamation. In other words, you shall proclaim, make a public proclamation. By Yom HaKippurim, on Yom Kippur. So there's a question now. Mimashma shene'emar b'Yom HaKippurim, from the implication of what is stated, that it's on Yom Kippur, Eini yodea shehu b'asor lachodesh. Can't I figure it out that it's the 10th day of the month? Don't we all know that Yom Kippur is on the 10th day of the 7th month, called Tishrei? Imkein lama ne'emar b'asor lachodesh. So if it's going to say Yom Kippur, why does it say the 10th of the month? Ela lomar. But to tell you, what it really comes to tell you is, Tikiyat Asor Lachodesh, that the sounding of the shofar on the 10th day of the month, that is Doche Shabbat, overrides the Sabbath, Bechol Artzachem, throughout your land, the Ein Tikiyat Rosh Hashanah Doche Shabbat Bechol Artzachem. And the sounding of the shofar on Rosh Hashanah does not override the Sabbath if Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbat. That you cannot sound the shofar anywhere, ella bebeitin, but only in a court. So yeah, give me one moment, please. Okay. Let's keep going. By the way, that is not actually the biblical law, right? Actually, according to biblical law, you can sound the shofar on Rosh Hashanah if it falls on Shabbat, but it is rabbinic law that says that we do not sound the shofar here in the diaspora on Rosh Hashanah. That's a rabbinic law, but it's interesting that despite the fact that this is an interpretation of it, okay, there's still certain modifications if Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbat.
What is the connection between sounding the shofar and the Shemitah year? In other words,
It's not the Shemitah year, it's the Jubilee year.
I mean the Jubilee. Yeah. What's the connection there? In other words, the year starts on Rosh Hashanah, but only 10 days later does it take effect?
Yes, correct. That's we'll see if Rashii determines that a little clearer. Yes, that is. You'll see what happens. This maybe we can fit in one more verse today. Okay, let's see what is. Okay, so it's only on Yom Kippur that you can sound the shofar anywhere in your land. So here, let's see. Yeah, here we go. Next verse. V'kidashtem et shnat hachamishim. You shall sanctify the 50th year. Sorry, I'm not reading this well. V'kidashtem et shnat hachamishim shana. And you shall sanctify the 50th year, the year of the 50th year. Ukratem dror. And you shall declare in a drawer, And they have to explain what that means. Ba'aretz lechol yoshveha, in the land, throughout the land, to all its inhabitants. And the dror, of course, means emancipation, is what it's going to mean. Freedom. Yovel hi tielachem. It shall be a Yovel to you. It shall, in other words, it's going to have a name. It's going to be called Yovel, based on the sounding of the shofar in that year on Yom Kippur. V'shavtem ish el achuzato, and every man shall return to his patrimony. The ish el mishpachto tashuvu, and every person shall return to his family this year. Let's take a look a little bit. We've got a teeny bit of time. V'kidashtem. So what do we mean to sanctify it? V'knisato. So what happens is when the year begins, maktishim oto bebeitin. So the great Sanhedrin would declare the year sanctified. V'omrim, and they say, mekudeshet hashana. This year is sanctified. So you make a formal declaration that this 50th year is a sanctified year. It's a special, that's essentially the meaning of sanctified, means it is sui generis, it's one of a kind, it's special, it's different from other years. Why? Ukratem dror, you shall declare a dror la'avadim, to slaves, bein nirtzah, whether they had a piercing. That's the slave who decides. This was mentioned back in Parshat Mishpatim in the book of Exodus, that if at the end of the 7 years the slave doesn't want to leave his master, he can have his ear pierced. By the way, a woman did not have that choice. She did not have her ear pierced. It was just applied to men. Bein shelo kalu lo sheishanim, whether 6 years had not finished, mishin nimkar, once he had been sold. So, in other words, it's saying, yes, on the one that the freedom happens even in a case where the person might have been sold by the Beit Din for 6 years, and the 6 years haven't finished. But on the other hand, the Jubilee year has interposed, that he gets set free. He is freed. Rosh Hashanah, and this is in tractate Rosh Hashanah. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, said Rabbi Yehuda, Mahu Lashon Dror. What is this? What does the language dror mean? Kemidayer be daira. It's like one who resides in an inn. So what they're meaning by that is shedar, that is to say, that he is able to live b'chol makom shehu rotzeh, any place he likes. Ve'eino b'rshut acherim, and he is no longer under the control of others. So that's how he understands that. That when I suppose that when you go to an inn, you get to choose a room, or you're there, you leave when you need to, etc. Yovel it is a Yovel, Shna Zot Muvdelet, this year is distinguished Misha'ar Shanim, from other years, B'nikivat Shem, in that it is designated by a name. La Levada, she alone, this year alone, Uma Shma, and what is its name? Yovel Shma. Yovel is its name, Al Shem Tkiyat Shofar, and the reason it's called a Yovel is because of the sounding of the shofar at its beginning. V'shavtem il ish el achuzato, and every man shall return to his patrimony, shehasadot chozrot levalehem. And what that is meaning is that the fields return to their original owner.
So if all of this is happening at the beginning,
yes,
there's the tekiah, there's the freedom,
yes,
and all that. What's holy about the rest of the year? Well, I mean, how is its holiness observed or noticed?
That okay. Well, the point is that okay, I would think, right, that once this is happening and people are now back on their land, that's still very, very significant, and that people would sense that. that had happened. I mean, I understand the point of your question, but I believe that, you know, it's possible. I mean, it's a great question. Does it mean that this happens any time during the year? It does happen at the beginning of the year. But my sense is this, that at that particular point, all things are set. That year marks it. Not only that, but you understand it's going to be another Shemitah year. We haven't dealt with that yet, but the entire year is going to be that. It's still going to be treated as a special year.
But it's not your land, or you don't own that land anymore. So it's wherever you are, you have to figure out how you're going to eat.
Yeah. Okay. No, wait a second.
That would be a tough year for somebody who didn't have a family home to go to.
Yes.
I'm guessing.
Well, they might have, but that's not necessarily. Let me see. Sorry, I'm just want to find the place for us to start.
I see so many problems with this that rabbis probably didn't even think about it.
So we have,
I wouldn't count on that. Okay, I wouldn't
Yeah.
count on rabbis not thinking about it. Okay, I
Mhm.
mean
I think we have 2 more Rashi's
yeah,
on this.
and not only that. Excuse me. You see all the stuff we're not doing. You see
Mhm.
all the Torah Temimah we are not covering. Okay.
So I assume there's like a whole list of what about.
Absolutely.
You know?
Of course.
Yeah.
But, you know, I mean, maybe Shira Beth can comment on it, since they do care about it. At least the observant community cares about it in the land of Israel. Although I'm not sure about the Jubilee. I don't know if they've lost count of those or if they still know.
I've only been here 35 years, so there hasn't been a Jubilee since I got here.
Maybe
But
you
the
should,
Shemitah year, definitely. There's a whole big deal about Shemitah year.
right. I mean, the question is even raised in the Torah. So, but I want to get back to what you were saying, Golda. Yes, it's true. The thing is, though, it's more the produce that we're talking about. So the
Yeah.
whole thing still comes under, if we're going to call it, say, rental, the rental returns to its original owner. They still have the land.
Okay, so even though you're released as a bond person or whatever, I guess you could stay,
No,
or you could,
Okay.
right.
Okay. If you're a bondsman, then you could go back to your family. You are no longer held in bond. Okay.
Okay.
It gets back to more complicated issues that we were raising yesterday about the fact that the reason we're talking about things in this way is because for the most part, it was an agricultural based society. But there certainly were people who were not farmers. They had to be, to take care
Yeah,
of
so they had to get their food somewhere, and
yeah,
yeah.
right. There were artisans of all kinds, I'm sure. Okay. But there are various situations where a person might sell themselves into slavery. But what I think is really significant about that is that if you consider slavery the actual selling of yourself, right, as opposed to your work, that in many ways what this was guaranteeing is that there isn't really such a thing as an Israelite slave in an Israelite society.
Right.
I mean, I wish I could say that it was universal, but at this particular point, there was still slavery, and the Torah even mentions it. There was still slavery regarding non-Israelite people.
Okay.
So
Yeah, that's a lot to wrap your head around. Yeah.
It is. We're going to have to stop. Yes. Let me stop there.